current public health orders in place, which is that you need to stay at home unless they have a reasonable excuse.
I'm having an arrest.
This is perhaps the scariest period that New South Wales is going through.
We're moving much further into a compliance and an enforcement regime around the order, rather than a simple education response to people.
The chaos and confusion of COVID lockdowns seem like a lifetime ago. But now, in the relative calm 2 years on, legal groups are contesting the actions of police and state governments.
The process was unjust, messy, and the rule of law was not followed.
During Sydney's second lockdown in August last year, Rowan Pank and Annalise Napper took a break from the confines of their homes. Amid the ever-changing rules, they thought they were in the clear.
We'd been sitting down for about 5-10 minutes and a group of police officers walked up behind us. So we thought we were following all the rules. And then, because we weren't actively exercising at the time, we were both issued with a $1,000 fine on the spot. You mean that bit over there?
New South Wales Health later clarified that sitting in a park in certain areas was within the rules. But Rowan says the detail of the offence was vague and asked for a review.
I think the reasoning for the fine was something to do with failure to comply with Section 7, 8 and 9 of the health guidelines, which doesn't actually specify specifically what I did that day in the park.
That vagueness is now the basis of a test case in the New South Wales Supreme Court, claiming that 45,000 fines are invalid.
The fine should have specified the details of the offence, so someone who wanted to challenge that fine knows what the police need to prove.
In New South Wales, more than half of the 62,000 COVID fines issued remain unpaid in full, while more than 1,300 have been dropped. 3,800 fines were issued to children between 13 and 17 years old.
These children have been fined for $1,000, $3,000 and $5,000. One child who has an intellectual disability was given 3 $1,000 fines for being out of his house. I'm of the view that he should never have been issued a fine. Under the Fines Act, someone who has an intellectual disability should not be issued with a fine.
New South Wales Police declined to comment, but the public servant responsible for fines has told 730 his organisation acted appropriately and that he welcomes any review of individual cases.
About 500 fines were issued for under 15s for not wearing a mask properly. That's a $40 fine. These have all been now resolved, those 500 fines.
How appropriate is it that children as young as 13 were fined?
It's a question that relates to the government policy and the public health orders that were in place. It was about protecting us all. The public health orders, I think in general, were highly effective in keeping us healthy and safe through this period. Does
it concern you that legally you can't pursue people if you're not spelling out what the offence is?
We're continuing to do our job, and if there was a direction that came through the courts that said otherwise, we'd adjust appropriately.
About 140 children volunteered to pay off their fines by attending a program known as a work and development order, where participants do unpaid work or activities.
They were like $500 or $1,000 per fine. For the clients we're working with, that could be their weekly or fortnightly pay. If they're working, if they're receiving Centrelink, it's even worse. Some people, they have to spend months and months engaging in activities just to get the fine down a bit.
At Rooty Hill in Sydney's West, Connor Jago was issued 2 COVID fines for not wearing a mask and a transport fine late last year. He was 17 at the time.
It's like $680 in fines. I was shocked, so I tried to take him to court straight away.
Could you afford that?
Nah, not at the time. That was more than I make in 2 weeks almost.
Connor sought legal advice and successfully challenged one of the COVID fines. The letter he received from the government about why it dropped the case was vague.
It just said that the fine was getting thrown out.
I understand completely that a fine affects people differently. Some people can't afford to pay that commitment. And the genuine commitment from my organisation and I is to have a conversation with people where they need help and support.
The review process can be complex and confusing, even for law lecturer Jason Chin. He ended up in court and successfully challenged a $1,000 fine for sitting in a park.
It was very unclear. There's no guidance about how to do it. It's lengthy, and it's just completely skewed against people who don't have resources.
In Victoria, where 50,000 fines were issued, legal groups have also called on the government to waive fines because they disproportionately affected poorer communities, a sentiment Australia's Human Rights Commissioner shares.
It's actually a nationwide issue, and what we really need to do is, firstly, in respect to the fines, pause enforcement until they can be properly reviewed so that the public can have confidence that the fine system is A, lawful, but B, working fairly. But secondly, we actually need to have a broader review into the pandemic response.
The Victorian government told 730 that its penalty system protected the state from the pandemic, and that options are available to those struggling to pay off fines. Back in Sydney, Rowan's fine has been dropped after he threatened to take the government to court.
These super vague fines that people probably weren't doing anything wrong, they definitely need to be reviewed.